All right, welcome to the Dales Report. Happy to be joined today with Eric Adams, who's the CEO of InMed Pharmaceuticals. Eric, great to have you on the podcast. How are things?
Doing well, Shad. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. This cannabis industry, a little bit of a roller coaster. What else is new, obviously, in the cannabis industry, right? But wanted to have you on. InMed Pharmaceuticals has an extensive history in the cannabis industry going back to 2014, during the crazy cannabis run. Like most companies in the space, you've dealt with some adversities recently, and a lot of companies have within the industry. So where are we today with the company, and what's the mission statement that you want to communicate to investors that's important for them moving forward?
Sure. Well, we are a pharmaceutical company through and through. That's the entire DNA of our management team and our history. What we're trying to do is discover the therapeutic potential of rare cannabinoids. So these would be the ones that are not CBD, are not THC. So we're working with non-intoxicating rare cannabinoids and trying to, treat some very serious diseases with these. We're looking at dermatology, a very severe, rare genetic skin condition on one hand, and we're also looking at glaucoma on the other hand. And we have other pipeline projects where we're looking at additional rare cannabinoids in additional diseases. But we think this class of compounds has a very broad therapeutic potential. We all know that cannabinoids interact with the human body in a number of different ways. And that's kind of led to the explosion a number of years ago of people looking at this. And so, the InMed, has been focusing on the pharmaceutical side. Recently, we announced that we are acquiring a manufacturer in the US that is a supplier to the health and wellness space, a company called Baymedica. So that really broadens the opportunities for us to look across the spectrum of uses of cannabinoids, not only in the pharmaceutical space, which remains our primary focus, but now also as a supplier to that health and wellness industry.
Well, let's get into some of that recent news. As you just said, InMed Pharmaceuticals has entered into a definitive agreement with Baymedica, which is a US-based company that specializes in, like you said, the manufacturing commercialization of rare cannabinoids. With it, InMed instantly becomes, as you said, basically a leader in the manufacturing of rare cannabinoids. So this has been an old topic, but here in 2021, the industry as a whole, when it comes to cannabinoids, is at the point where they're now scalable, commercialized in the mainstream. So walk us through what this acquisition means for you and how significant this industry can become in 1 to 2 years from now.
Yeah, it's a great addition to what we're currently doing. It strengthens not only our pharmaceutical development plans, but now changes us into a revenue generating company in a space that is just set to explode, in my opinion. If you look back over the years, people go back 2 or 3 years ago, people were using CBD in everything. They saw that there were benefits in the health and wellness space, and they started using it in multiple products. I think that's kind of been turned down just a little bit as people start to realize where the true benefit of CBD is. And now we have all of these other rare cannabinoids. Now, historically, you could not access these things at a reasonable cost. If you go back a year and a half, 2 years ago, if you saw something that contained a rare cannabinoid, it would say infused with something because it had, just minute quantities of that rare cannabinoid. You couldn't put more than that into a product and sell it because you'd have to sell it for hundreds of dollars, right? So you're completely out of the market at that point.
Makes sense.
Modern manufacturing techniques, especially some of the ones that Baymedica have unlocked, are now changing that. So they started with a rare cannabinoid called cannabichromene, or CBC.
Okay.
And, a couple of years ago, this was selling for, on a per kilogram basis for $90,000, $100,000 per kilogram, just because it was so expensive to make. They came up with a way to make this a lot less expensive. And now they can supply that to the whole industry where they can start to use meaningful quantities in their products and unlock the health benefits of that particular naturally occurring, bioidentical, yet synthetically manufactured cannabinoid. The synthetic manufacturing is important because it gives you consistent quality every time you make it. Extracting from a plant, you can get all kinds of stuff that you don't intend to have, and that can change each time you do it. Synthetic is important to give you the high quality and purity and repeatability of manufacturing.
Do you think enough investors, or consumers for that matter, are understanding the growth and maturity of some of the stuff that you just outlined with where we are today in this industry?
I think we're on the verge of kind of turning the corner with this whole industry. Certainly from a the people who are manufacturing the end products, so they're making skin creams, they're making gummy bears, they're making tablets, whatever they're making, they are aware that there's a huge potential here. They're trying to access these rare cannabinoids, but they just haven't been able to do it at a reasonable cost. So now that, you kind of turn the lock, you're opening the door with this new manufacturing approach, I think you're going to see just a use of these products in a meaningful way across the health and wellness sector.
Do you think, as we talk about metrics you're seeing with cost and whether those costs are scalable enough to entice big consumer product good companies moving forward, are we there yet?
From a cost perspective, we absolutely are. And that's something that Baymedica really brings to the table. Not only with something like CBC, which, if you think back, nobody knew what CBC was 2 years ago. And so there was a little bit of a market there. They came up with a better way of making it. Okay. And they've now been able to generate, small but meaningful revenues for a product that is still trying to find its place in consumer goods. But you now apply that manufacturing know-how to some of the much bigger ones that people are really looking to integrate into products. Things like CBDV, which is the Varin family, THCV, which is non-intoxicating, but has a lot of health benefits, in particular as a dietary aid for weight loss. I've had people, even before we announced this Baymedica deal, I've had people calling me and saying, can you make me THCV? I will buy all that you can manufacture. Right. So I'm like, well, okay, that's interesting that people are, we've never even mentioned it in anything that we do, but yet people are so desperate to find it. They're calling around trying to get their hands on it. So that really kind of led me to thinking, well, I wonder if Baymedica could do that. And certainly not only could they do it, they've been working on that and scaling that up. So I think we're right on the, the turning point for this whole industry. Yeah.
It's the opportunity that America brings, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So they're based in the U.S. They've been supplying a number of manufacturers down there and wholesalers. Baymedica is not a company that has its own brands on the shelf that you can go buy. They supply to people who put those cannabinoids into their own products and then promote them, how they see fit.
So when I look at this, roughly there's about 100 rare cannabinoids found in the cannabis plant, which makes up less than 1% of the plant biomass, which means to many that we're only scratching at the surface when it comes to, the medical benefits. Do you think we will see these types of cannabinoids in OTC medications, such as sleeping pills and pain relief medications moving forward?
You do already. So there are a number of different sleep aids out there that are cannabinoid based. There's a number of different anti-inflammatory creams that people are using that are cannabinoid based. So, the key here is just unlocking the ability to use meaningful amounts because of the low cost, right? And when I say low cost, you're kind of going from where, $80,000, $90,000 per kilogram to where Baymedica can manufacture them at such a low cost, they can sell them for, 10 to 20,000 per kilogram, and probably even lower than that, while maintaining a really attractive margin on their sale.
And very effective too, don't you find, when it comes to pain relief?
Absolutely. I mean, CBD is well known as an anti-inflammatory agent. I've used it in the past in certain instances. A lot of athletes are using it as well. Yep. And that's just one of these 100 cannabinoids that are there to be explored and to be understood.
Yeah. Let's switch now to your clinical model. InMed has filed applications in its multiple countries for its own phase 2 clinical trial for compound called INM-755, which is a proprietary CBN topical cream formulation. So was your clinical trial pipeline strategy in reference to basically the acquisition of Baymedica?
No, so that kind of is, historically what InMed is focused on, and that is the therapeutic and clinical trial pathway with FDA approval and prescription drug-based, launches. Just to put these things into perspective, you can have a highly successful over-the-counter or in the health and wellness space that can sell, tens of millions of dollars, and that's considered a home run. In pharmaceuticals, if you go through this investment, you demonstrate a meaningful benefit in a serious disease, the revenues are hundreds of millions of dollars per year.
Right.
even billions of dollars per year for the one product. So it takes longer. It's much more expensive to invest in getting those approvals and demonstrating its ability specifically in treating one disease. But if you can prove that it's beneficial, there's a really attractive commercial payout on the back end. So that's the side that most of our management team comes from.
Yep.
One of the things that's interesting about Baymedica is they've taken the naturally occurring cannabinoids and they've modified them slightly in a way that may elevate their therapeutic effect. Now, these are called new chemical entities, or NCEs. They're patentable. The naturally occurring cannabinoids are not, because they occur in nature. No one can own a patent on the compound itself.
Okay.
But these new chemical entities that they've created that are analogs to cannabinoids will be put through our screening process on the pharmaceutical side, and we'll start to look for uses of these novel compounds. That's really going to be really interesting to the larger pharmaceutical companies and biotech companies, because foundationally they want to have a patent on whatever they're working on, right? That secures their commercial rights, yeah. So that they don't have any competition. So interestingly, this is kind of an aspect of Baymedica that was a little bit buried, but they filed a really important patent on what could be hundreds, if not thousands, of these analogs. So it's a very valuable treasure trove for us to start digging through and finding the real gems.
Well, big pharma's got to be warming up to this industry more and more, especially with the acquisition that Jazz Pharmaceuticals had with GW Pharmaceuticals. You see, and obviously you would, there's got to be a new company within the industry that's going to emerge relatively soon. Do you not think?
Well, certainly it's taken time. Cannabinoids have always had that taboo of THC and marijuana. I think that's now been set aside. People understand it a lot better. They understand that there's really only one cannabinoid that's intoxicating and the rest do other things.
Mm-hmm.
So slowly that's melted away. You have to see some change of legislation in all countries that will allow for easier research of these compounds. But I think we're kind of squarely in that space. There's only a few companies that are focused exclusively on the clinical trial pathway for cannabinoids, GW being one of them. And so, we kind of are right there. And now with these new analogs that are patentable, I think that's what's really needed to kind of, hit turbo on this whole side of the business.
Business-wise, if you could forecast 12 months from now and somebody asks you this question, what would you say?
So what are we talking about? Are we talking about our company specifically? Are we talking about the cannabinoids for health and wellness in general?
I mean, in general, just the overall business model, what you're focusing on, what this acquisition obviously means to the company. And then in addition to that, just there's still, obviously, it's not federally legalized within the US, but as that comes to fruition more and more, the opportunity it presents. And obviously there's a lot of things that we could touch on as far as where this company is, but the opportunity itself for the overall industry, what you're producing and what this would mean for investors potentially.
Yeah. So, legalization or legalization of cannabis, would help reduce some of the barriers for sure to the pathways that we're pursuing. In particular to what we're hoping to accomplish with this Baymedica acquisition, which, by the way, is set to close in a couple of weeks. We signed a definitive agreement. We still have to close the transaction, but that we're confident we can get that done. Where do we see ourselves? Well, I think Baymedica is poised to launch a number of very high value rare cannabinoids into the health and wellness space as a supplier, raw material supplier. Things like CBDV, things like THCV, and a few others that they are already in the process of scaling up. So we're optimistic that those products will be launched over the course of the next year as soon as possible. We think that there is significant revenue opportunities here. So while CBC is kind of generating with a broad brushstroke, kind of in the ballpark of $2 million per year right now.
Yeah.
That's just a start. I mean, that's not even scratching the surface of what this market could be. It could easily, writ large. I think I've seen a report where this year it's predicted to be 200 million for rare cannabinoid supply sales. It's expected to grow to 10 billion in 4 or 5 years' time. So this is really a segment that's set to take off. And we think we're squarely positioned to be a player.
We're seeing the growth of an industry in our own eyes, are we not? It's really starting to come to, I know there was a lot of crazy expectations with what happened, 4 or 5 years ago, but now probably, would have been best for a lot of investors if it would have started out slowly, and I think that's an understatement. But like you said, it's companies like yourself that are creating opportunities when you actually see the overall maturity of an industry, correct?
Absolutely. And, we're so much farther along than we were several years ago. We've actually conducted clinical trials for the dermatology application. We're entering phase 2 trial in Europe, as you mentioned. We're going to start enrolling in the next coming weeks. So, we continue. And again, the pharma process is a longer one. It requires more patience from investors, but we've now tacked onto that the excitement of launching these other rare cannabinoids into the health and wellness space, which we think are going to be significant revenue generators for the company.
You trade on the NASDAQ under what's your ticker symbol?
INM.
Excellent. Listen, this is going to be the first of many conversations as we learn more about your story, but I appreciate you checking in. I know you're busy, but fascinating to see with this acquisition and then the future of the overall industry. So good things to come, but I appreciate you taking the time to check in on the podcast today.
Great. Thanks, Shad. Great talking to you. And I look forward to another one.
Yes. Thanks, Eric.